Commander Marcus Hayes walked into the Great Hall of the Galactic Coalition. The room was massive and filled with thousands of aliens from different worlds. The humans had just won a big war against the Dominion fleet. No one expected this to happen. The old alien powers thought humans were primitive and weak. The Coalition had an old rule. The victor of a major conflict could claim a reward. Most military leaders asked for advanced weapons, rare materials, or control of new planets. Marcus had different ideas. The Valorian delegation stood at the far end of the hall. They were tall and thin with skin that shimmered like water. They had powerful minds that could move objects and control other beings. The Valorians had ruled part of the galaxy for thousands of years through this power. But one Valorian stood alone in a small chamber away from the others. This was Princess Kale. She was different from her people. Her mother was Valorian, but her father was from another species. This mixed blood made her weak compared to pure Valorians. She could not use telepathic powers like the rest of her family. The Valorians saw her as a failure and a shame to their royal line. Marcus pointed directly at Princess Kale. The entire hall went silent. Thousands of eyes turned to look at the commander and then at the princess. The Valorian ambassadors did not understand. This made no sense. Why would a human commander choose a weak princess with no real power? She could not fight in battles. She had no telepathic abilities. She could not negotiate for her people. She was worthless by galactic standards. But Marcus was serious. He walked forward and declared that he wanted Princess Kale as his reward for winning the war. The hall filled with confused noise. Aliens whispered to each other. Some laughed quietly. The Valorians looked relieved. They saw this as a chance to get rid of a problem. A useless royal was no longer their burden. The Valorian High Ambassador stepped forward. His name was Theron, and he had ruled over the Valorians for 400 years. He smiled at Marcus. The ambassador was happy. This was the best outcome. The humans had taken away someone the Valorians did not want. "We accept your terms, Commander," Theron said. "The princess is yours." Guards brought Princess Kale forward. She was smaller than most Valorians. Her skin did not shimmer as brightly. Her eyes showed fear and sadness. She had spent her whole life being told she was weak and broken. Now she would belong to an alien species. She did not know what would happen to her. Marcus looked at the princess. He saw something the rest of the galaxy did not see. He saw a young woman who had survived her entire life being told she was worthless. He saw someone who had learned to survive without the powers that defined her species. He saw potential where others saw only failure. "Princess Kale," Marcus said clearly, "from this moment forward, you will be treated with respect and dignity. That is my promise to you." The other aliens did not understand these words. To them, respect and dignity were things given only to the strong and powerful. A weak person deserved nothing. But Marcus meant what he said. The Valorian delegation left the Great Hall quickly. They wanted nothing more to do with their failed princess. The other alien powers turned away. This choice made no sense to them. They saw it as a mistake or a trick. They did not understand. But something had happened in that moment that would change the galaxy forever. A human commander had seen value in someone everyone else had rejected. He had chosen her not because she was strong or powerful, but because she deserved a chance to prove what she could do. The transport ship left the Dio Coalition station and headed toward Earth. Princess Kale sat in a small room on the ship. She had never left her home world before. The other Valorians had always kept her away from public life. They did not want the rest of the galaxy to know about their weak princess. Marcus came to her quarters one evening. Kale was frightened. She did not know what a human commander would want from her. In her experience, power was the only thing that mattered. Those with power took what they wanted from those without it. I wanted to explain my choice, Marcus said simply. He sat across from her. He was not threatening or demanding. He was just talking like two people having a conversation. Why? Kale asked. Her voice was very quiet. I am weak. I have no power. I cannot help you. Marcus shook his head. The Valorians measure strength only by telepathic power. They think this is the only kind of strength that matters. But I see other kinds of strength. He explained how Kale had survived her entire life without the powers her people valued. She had learned to think for herself. She had adapted to a world that told her she had no value. She had survived. That was its own kind of strength. Kale did not cry. Instead, she asked Marcus many questions. She wanted to know about humans and human values. She wanted to know why he thought differently than the rest of the galaxy. She wanted to understand. Over the next weeks of travel, Kale spent hours in the ship's library. She read human history and human philosophy. She learned about human mistakes and human victories. She discovered that humans valued different things than her people did. Humans valued courage, not just power. They valued creativity and the ability to solve problems. They valued compassion and the willingness to protect others. Humans thought that individual worth came from what you chose to do, not from what you were born with. This was revolutionary to Kale. Her entire life, the Valorians had told her that her worth was fixed. She was born weak, so she was weak. There was nothing she could do to change it. But humans had a different idea. They thought you could build your own value through your actions. As the ship approached Earth Station Orbital, Marcus made Kale an offer. She could return to Valorian society and try to find a place there. Or she could stay with the humans and help them understand the galaxy, and help the galaxy understand humans. For the first time in her life, someone was asking what Kale wanted. No one had ever asked her opinion before. No one had ever cared about her choices. Kale stood at the window and looked out at Earth in the distance. Blue and green and white. A world so different from her home. A world that had chosen her when her own world had rejected her. She turned to Marcus with a clear answer. I will stay. I want to help build something new. Marcus nodded. He had known what her answer would be. He had seen the determination in her eyes. She was weak by Valorian standards, but she was strong in ways that mattered more. The galaxy had no idea what was coming next. 6 months passed. Princess Kale had arrived at Earth Station Orbital and immediately begun working with the human diplomatic corps. Most of the aliens at the Coalition headquarters expected her to be decorative or useless. They were shocked when she proved to be one of the most valuable people in the human delegation. Kale had spent her entire life watching her people from the outside. She had learned their politics and their psychology without being part of their inner circles. She understood Valorian thinking better than most. Valorians because she had studied it academically rather than living it naturally. But that was only part of her value. Kale had also learned to think like a human. She had read human literature and studied human history. She understood that humans made decisions differently. They valued things the old galaxy did not value. The first major test came when the Coalition needed to negotiate with the Clethrony Empire. The Clethrony were a warrior species that respected only military strength. Every previous negotiation with them had failed. The Clethrony wanted more territory. They wanted control of trade routes. They wanted power. The old alien powers sent military representatives to negotiate. The Clethrony ignored their offers. They saw weakness in diplomacy. They saw only the chance to take what they wanted by force. Marcus asked Kale for advice. How do we negotiate with a species that only respects strength? Kale thought about this carefully. She had learned that the answer was rarely simple. Show them that humans have strength they do not expect. Show them that refusing to fight when you could fight is a choice, not weakness. Show them that our strength comes from something different than theirs. Marcus nodded and sent a new team to negotiate with the Clethrony. But he sent something unexpected along with them. He sent Kale. The Clethrony were shocked. A weak alien princess walking into their war room? This was an insult or a trick. But Kale began to speak, and she explained something the Clethrony had never considered. She told them about human death worlds. Earth was dangerous and harsh. Humans had evolved in an environment that wanted to kill them. This had made humans fierce and determined. But it had also made humans understand loss and death in a way that comfortable species did not. Humans understood the value of survival and the need to work together. She explained that humans could destroy the Clethrony if they chose to fight. Humans had weapons and tactics the Clethrony did not expect. But humans chose not to fight because fighting would create more suffering. Humans wanted peace because they understood pain. The Clethrony commander listened. He was old and had fought in many wars. He had lost soldiers and leaders. He understood that some costs were too high. You suggest that refusing to fight is strength? He asked. I suggest that choosing not to destroy your enemy when you can is the greatest strength. Kale replied simply. Any species can kill. Choosing not to kill when you have the power to do so takes more strength than any weapon. The Clethrony agreed to the human terms. It was the first negotiation the Clethrony had ever accepted without victory in combat. News spread through the coalition quickly. The weak princess had succeeded where powerful diplomats had failed. The galaxy began to notice something strange. This Valorian princess, who was rejected by her own people, was becoming more valuable than any full-blooded Valorian. Other delegations requested her presence at their negotiations. The Helkians, a species that measured intelligence above all else, wanted her to help them discuss trade agreements. The Sarlan, who valued artistic expression, wanted her to help build cultural exchanges. The Dominion, the species humanity had defeated in war, wanted to understand how humans thought so differently. Kale was asked to join the permanent Diplomatic Council of the Coalition. This was an incredible honor. Full ambassadors from the strongest species in the galaxy sat on this council. And now a rejected princess was joining them. The Valorians heard about this development. The High Ambassador Theron was not pleased. He had thought Kale would disappear into obscurity. Instead, she had become one of the most influential figures in the entire coalition. He sent a message to Marcus demanding an explanation. Why was the princess being elevated to such a position? She represented nothing. She had no power. She was a failure. Marcus replied with a simple message. She represents what humanity values. She represents the strength in accepting your own weakness and building something greater. That is worth more than all the telepathic power in your galaxy. Kale continued her work. She began training other alien diplomats in human philosophy. She taught them that strength had different forms. She taught them that value was not fixed from birth. She taught them that someone could be weak in one way and strong in many others. The galaxy was changing. Not all at once. Not everyone agreed. But slowly, the old hierarchy of power based on physical strength and telepathic ability began to shift. Marginal figures from other species reached out to Kale, those who did not fit their species' narrow definitions of success, those deemed unsuitable for leadership. They came seeking what Kale had found, a place where their different kind of strength was recognized and valued. A Xanish mathematician who was too sensitive for military service found work in human research facilities. A Tellurian artist who had been cast out for refusing to create propaganda became a famous human cultural ambassador. An Aquelan whose telepathic abilities never developed, became a teacher of alien languages. Each of them had been rejected by their own people. Each of them found purpose working with humans. And each of them confirmed what Marcus had known from the beginning. Value is not something you were born with. Value is something you created through your choices and your work. The Coalition's old guard did not like this change. Power structures that had existed for thousands of years were being questioned. Aliens who had ruled through simple dominance were being challenged by new ideas. But the change was happening. And Princess Kale, once the weakest and most worthless member of her species, was at the center of it all. 1 year after Princess Kale joined the Coalition's diplomatic council, the Dominion launched a surprise attack on the human colony at Kepler 442b. The attack was brutal and unexpected. 3,000 humans were killed before the defense systems activated. The galaxy waited to see how humanity would respond. Many expected savage retaliation. Humans were from a death world. Humans were fierce and violent. Humans would want revenge. The Valorians sent messages saying they would support military action. The Clethrony offered to join any assault on the Dominion worlds. The Helians prepared their fleet for what they assumed would be an extended war. But Marcus had different plans. He called an emergency meeting of the Coalition's leadership. Kale was there. So were the ambassadors of every major species. Marcus explained what humanity would do. Humanity would defend the colony. They would save the remaining survivors. They would prepare their military to strike back if the Dominion attacked again. But they would also attempt to negotiate. The room exploded in noise. This made no sense. The Dominion had just killed thousands of humans. How could humanity even consider talking to them? Because, Marcus said calmly, we learned something from our weakness. We learned that there is always a better way than total destruction. He sent a diplomatic team to the Dominion's main fleet. They brought weapons and soldiers for protection. But they also brought something else. They brought Kale. The Dominion's commander was named Vex. He was a massive creature with 4 arms and armor that covered his entire body. His species valued only strength and conquest. He had ordered the attack because he thought humanity was weak. He wanted to prove it. When Kale walked into his war room, Vex laughed. A princess? The humans send a princess? I am Princess Kale of the Valorians, she said. I was rejected by my people because I had no telepathic power. I was weak. I had no value. And then a human commander chose me. He chose me not because I was strong, but because he saw value where others saw only failure. Vex was confused. This made no sense. Strength and power were all that mattered. Everything else was irrelevant. Kale continued speaking. Your empire is strong in one way. You are powerful warriors. You take what you want. But I have learned something from humans that you have never considered. Taking something that is not yours creates enemies. Building something with others creates allies. I need no allies, Vex said. I need only strength. Do you? Kale asked. Then why did your attack fail? Why did the humans survive? Why are you here listening to a weak princess instead of celebrating your victory? Vex had no answer. The truth was that the human colony had survived. The humans had been faster and smarter than expected. They had used tactics Vex did not anticipate. And most importantly, they had not broken. When a normal species was attacked like that, they surrendered. Humans fought harder. Marcus stood beside Kale. We could destroy your fleet, he said simply. We have the weapons and the knowledge. But we will not. Instead, we offer peace. We offer the chance to build something together instead of destroying each other. Vex looked at these 2 aliens, a human commander and a weak princess. They stood before him with no fear. They spoke without the anger he expected. They offered mercy when they had the power to offer only death. The great warrior commander of the Dominion made a choice that shocked his own people. He agreed to peace talks. He agreed to stop the attack. He agreed to join the coalition's new framework. When the news spread, the old powers were stunned. The Dominion, one of the most aggressive species in the galaxy, had been negotiated with. Not defeated. Negotiated with. By a human and a rejected Valorian princess. Back at Coalition headquarters, Kale was celebrated as a hero. But she refused the honor. "I did nothing," she said. "Marcus made the choice. I only explained it in a language the Dominion could understand." The victory changed everything. Every species in the coalition began to question their structure. Why did they only value one kind of strength? Why did they reject those who did not fit their standards? Why not use the diversity of their different peoples as a strength instead of as a weakness? The Valorian High Council requested a meeting with Marcus and Kale. They came to Earth Station, Orbital, expecting to take back their princes. They believed that their shame had now become valuable. They wanted to use Kale's influence for Valorian gain, but Kale refused to return to them. "I am not Valorian anymore," she said. "Not because I rejected my blood, but because I have become something more. I have become someone who sees value in all things. Your people only see value in one thing. I cannot live that way." The High Council was humiliated, but they understood. Their rejected princess had become something they could never be. She had transcended their limitations, and she had done it by leaving them behind. Marcus stood with Kale as the Valorian delegation departed. "Do you have regrets?" he asked. Kale thought about her old life. The rejection. The pain. The feeling of worthlessness. "No," she said. "You gave me the chance to become something that is worth more than any royal title." The coalition continued to change. Species that had ruled through dominance were slowly adapting. They began to see that strength could come in many forms. They began to accept members of their own species who did not fit the traditional molds. They began to believe that diversity was a strength instead of a weakness. And at the center of all this change was the simple fact that one human commander had chosen the weakest princess when he could have chosen the strongest warrior. And by making that choice, he had changed the entire galaxy. 2 years after the attack on the human colony, the Galactic Coalition underwent its biggest reorganization in 10,000 years. The old system of power based on military might and telepathic ability was being replaced with something new. The Coalition's council had always been ruled by the strongest species. The Valorians, with their powerful minds, had dominated. The Clethrani, with their fighting skills, had held influence. The Helians, with their intelligence, had controlled research and development. But Marcus proposed something different. He suggested that the council should include representation from every perspective. That value should be measured in many ways. That the galaxy needed different kinds of strength to survive and thrive. This was revolutionary. The old powers argued against it fiercely, but they had lost their moral authority. Kale had shown them that their way was incomplete. A princess they had rejected had solved problems their strongest minds could not solve. The vote to restructure the coalition passed. The new system would have different representation. Scientific experts, diplomatic specialists, military strategists, and cultural ambassadors would all have a voice. Power would be shared instead of concentrated, but there was one more step. The coalition needed a leader. Traditionally, the leader came from the strongest species. But Marcus proposed something different. He suggested they elect a leader based on wisdom and vision, not on species strength. The nomination process was open to all qualified candidates. Hundreds of names were submitted. Species from across the galaxy offered their strongest leaders. The Valorians nominated their High Ambassador. The Clethrani nominated their greatest general. The Helians nominated their most brilliant scientist, and the human delegation nominated Princess Kale. The other species laughed at first. A rejected princess? Someone who had no hereditary right to lead anything? But then they remembered. This princess had negotiated peace with the Dominion. She had brought harmony to species that had fought for generations. She had seen value where others saw only weakness. The election campaign was strange. Kale refused to promise power or conquest. She promised only to listen to all voices and to make decisions based on what would help all species, not just her own. Her opponents attacked her weakness. She had no military experience. She had no scientific credentials. She had never commanded anything. She was not even a full member of her own species. Kale responded to these attacks with honesty. I am not the strongest or the smartest, but I have learned something that is more important. I have learned to see value in different kinds of strength. I have learned that the best decisions come from listening to everyone, not just the powerful. The election was held across all coalition worlds. Every citizen could vote, regardless of species or status. This was unprecedented. In the old system, only the strongest had power. Now everyone had a voice. When the results were announced, Kale had won by a massive majority. Even species that had initially opposed the new system voted for her, because they saw something in her that reminded them of what could be possible. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall where it had all begun. The same place where Marcus had pointed to a rejected princess and claimed her as his reward. Now that same princess stood before the entire galaxy to accept the title of Supreme Leader of the Galactic Coalition. Theron, the Valorian High Ambassador, was present. He watched as Kale took the oath of office. 1,000 years of his species' dominance was ending. The Valorians would no longer rule the galaxy. But Theron was not angry. He was something else. He was curious about what would come next. After the ceremony, Theron approached Kale privately. Why have you done this? He asked. You could have taken power and used it against your own people. You could have made the Valorians suffer for rejecting you. Kale looked at her former people's leader. Because revenge would have made me just like you. I would have measured my worth by my power over others. But I have learned that worth comes from something different. It comes from helping others find their own strength. She offered Theron a position in her new cabinet. Not because the Valorians deserved it, but because Theron had knowledge and experience that could help lead the galaxy wisely. Over the next months, the coalition transformed. Species that had been rejected for their weakness began to find places of honor and responsibility. A Xantish mathematician became chief of research and development. A Tellurian artist became ambassador of cultural exchange. An Aquilian teacher became chief of education. The old hierarchies did not disappear overnight. There was resistance from species that had benefited from the old system. The Valorians struggled to accept that their telepathic power no longer guaranteed them leadership. The Clethrani had to learn that military strength was important but not sufficient. But slowly, they adapted. They began to see that a galaxy that valued many kinds of strength was stronger than a galaxy that valued only one kind. They discovered that their people were more creative and more capable when they were not forced into narrow roles. Marcus stood in the leader's office, with Kale as she reviewed reports from across the galaxy. There were still conflicts and problems, but they were being solved with negotiation and creativity instead of violence and domination. Do you remember why I chose you? Marcus asked. Kale smiled. You said it was because I had survived without the powers my people valued. You said that was its own kind of strength. That was true, Marcus said, but it was only part of the truth. I chose you because I believed in something. I believed that the galaxy was tired of being measured by only one kind of strength. I believed that there were people everywhere who had value that was never recognized. And I believed that if someone could prove that belief, the whole galaxy would have to change. Kale looked down at the coalition worlds displayed on the screens before her. Thousands of planets, millions of species, all trying to find their place in a galaxy that was learning a new way. "Thank you for believing," she said. "Thank you for choosing me when no one else would have." But Marcus shook his head. "I did not give you anything you did not already have. I only recognized what was already there. The strength was always inside you. I just gave you the chance to show it to the galaxy." The two of them stood in silence, watching the future they had created unfold before them. A galaxy that was learning that strength came in many forms. A universe that was beginning to understand that everyone had value, even those the world had rejected. And it had all started with one simple choice. A human commander selecting the weakest princess when he could have chosen the strongest warrior. 5 years after Kale became the supreme leader of the Galactic Coalition, a young Valorian approached her office. His name was Kareth, and he was half Valorian, like Kale. But unlike Kale, his human parent had been a soldier, and he had inherited some of their strength. Still, he was not powerful enough by traditional Valorian standards. Kareth had come to ask Kale for advice. The Valorians were offering him a choice. He could accept his mixed heritage and leave his people like Kale had done. Or he could undergo an experimental procedure that might amplify his telepathic powers and make him acceptable to Valorian society. Kale invited him into her office and listened to his problem. She understood exactly what he was feeling. The pressure to be something you were not. The pain of being rejected by your own people. The temptation to change yourself to fit what others wanted. But she offered him a different perspective. "The question is not whether you can become what they want," she said. "The question is whether you want to be something that requires you to stop being yourself." Kareth left her office, thinking about these words. He spent weeks traveling throughout the coalition worlds. He saw Xantish mathematicians doing brilliant work. He saw Tellurian artists creating beautiful things. He saw Kellans teaching new generations. He saw species and individuals thriving in roles that their own people had said were impossible. He returned to Kale and made his choice. He would not undergo the procedure. Instead, he would stay with the Valorians and try to change them from within. He would work to help his people understand that there were other ways to measure strength. His choice inspired others. More mixed-race individuals began to stay with their people instead of leaving. They began to question their species' rigid systems. They began to create change from the inside. The Valorians were not happy with this development, but they could not stop it. Their leader, Kale, had ultimate authority in the coalition, and she supported anyone who wanted to challenge their narrow definitions of worth. Slowly, the Valorians began to change. Young Valorians who did not develop strong telepathic powers found places in society instead of being exiled. Scientists studied whether there might be value in the diversity of different types of minds. Artists began creating works that explored the experience of feeling weak in a society that only valued strength. The transformation was not easy. Theron and other old leaders resisted the changes, but their resistance only slowed things. It could not stop the momentum that Kale had started. 10 years after that first election, Kale stepped down from her position as Supreme Leader. She had accomplished what she wanted to accomplish. The old hierarchies were broken. The new system was working. Other leaders were rising up who understood the new way of thinking. The coalition held a ceremony to honor Kale's service. Species from every corner of the galaxy came to celebrate what she had done. Vex, the Dominion commander who had made peace instead of war, presented her with a medal. The Clethrani gave her the title of Eternal Ally. The Helians composed a mathematical equation that described her impact on galactic society. But the honor that mattered most to Kale came from the ordinary people, the ones who had been rejected by their species and found new homes, the ones who had been told they had no value and discovered that they did. They came to thank her for giving them a chance. Marcus was now retired, but he attended the ceremony. When he saw Kale being honored by the entire galaxy, he felt something deep inside. He had been right. By choosing the weakest princess, he had changed everything. After the ceremony, Kale and Marcus stood together on a balcony overlooking the Coalition headquarters. The view showed dozens of different alien species working together. Scientists and soldiers, artists and diplomats, all contributing their different kinds of strength. "What will you do now?" Marcus asked Kale. "I want to tell the story," Kale said. "I want to make sure that future generations understand what happened. I want them to know that anyone can be valuable. That weakness is not permanent. That the system we are born into is not the system we have to accept." She began writing her story. It was not a military history. It was not a political analysis. It was simply the truth of what she had experienced. A young princess rejected by her people. A human commander who saw something everyone else missed. A galaxy that learned to measure strength in new ways. The book became the most widely read text in the Coalition. It was translated into every language. Children from different species grew up reading about Kale and learning that they did not have to fit into the boxes their societies had created for them. But the most powerful impact came in subtle ways. A young Clethrony who was not interested in fighting became a teacher instead of a warrior. Her species supported her choice. A Helion who wanted to create art instead of just analyze things was encouraged to pursue his passion. His people celebrated his work. Species everywhere began asking themselves new questions. What were we losing by only valuing one kind of strength? Who were we rejecting but could be valuable? What possibilities had we missed by being blind to different kinds of worth? The answer was that they had been losing almost everything. They had been like farmers who only grew one crop and threw away all the seeds for different plants. They had been poor without knowing it. But now they were becoming rich in ways they had never imagined. 20 years after Marcus chose the weakest princess, a new generation of coalition leaders was being trained. They studied Kale's methods and principles. They learned to see value in diversity. They understood that the strongest societies were not the ones with the most power concentrated in a few hands. They were the societies that could use every person's unique gifts. Kale, now older and quieter, mentored these new leaders. She told them that she had not created this change alone. She had simply been willing to accept a choice that seemed crazy to everyone else. And then she had worked every day to prove that the choice was right. On the anniversary of the first coalition restructuring, Kale was asked to make a speech. She stood before thousands of aliens from hundreds of species. She looked out at the diversity before her and remembered the rejected girl she had been. 20 years ago, she said, I was told that I had no value. My own people rejected me because I did not have the powers they valued. I was the weakest princess in an empire that only measured strength one way. And then something unexpected happened. A human commander chose me when he could have chosen anyone else. She paused and looked directly at Marcus, who sat in the audience smiling. He did not choose me because I was strong. He chose me because he believed that strength came in many forms. He chose me because he thought the galaxy was wrong about what mattered. And by making that choice, he forced the galaxy to confront what it had been refusing to see. She continued speaking about what they had built together. A society that measured people by what they could do, not by what they could not do. A civilization that valued different kinds of minds and different kinds of hearts. A galaxy that was finally learning to be wise. When she finished speaking, the entire assembly stood and applauded. Not because she had been born royal or because she had special powers, but because she had shown them all what was possible when someone was willing to believe in value that others could not see. That night, Kale walked through the Coalition Gardens with Marcus. The gardens had been built to display plants from every world in the Coalition. Some flowers were bright and beautiful. Some were small and hidden. Some were strange and difficult to understand. But all of them had their place. All of them made the garden more beautiful. "Do you think it will last?" Kale asked. "Do you think the galaxy has really changed, or will they go back to the old ways?" Marcus looked at the gardens around them. "I think people are always tempted to go back to simple ways of thinking. But you have shown them something they cannot unsee. You have shown them that their old way was broken, and you have lived a life that proves a better way exists. I think that is enough to keep the galaxy moving forward." Kale nodded. She thought about all the young people who would grow up in a different galaxy than the one she had been born into. They would know that they did not have to be strong in the way their societies had defined strength. They could be strong in their own ways. They could contribute their own gifts. They could find their own value. And it had all started with a human commander who walked into a great hall and pointed to the weakest princess. By choosing her, he had taught the entire galaxy something it desperately needed to learn. That value was not fixed. That strength came in many forms. That anyone, even someone everyone else had rejected, could change the universe. The two of them stood in the gardens as the sun set over the Coalition headquarters. In the distance, ships from 100 worlds prepared to travel to 100 different places. Each one carrying people who had learned that they mattered. Each one carrying hope that the galaxy was becoming something better than it had been. And in that moment, both Marcus and Kale understood the truth that would echo through history. The greatest strength is not in power or in dominance. The greatest strength is in seeing value where others see only weakness. And the greatest victory is not in conquest, but in transformation.